Hello, welcome to another Burgundy with Tweedy. I've put on a light because it's just a bit too gloomy. It's just about sunset. I wanted to change from the Philippe Gavinier wines that I've been gorging on. So this instead, as it happens, ended up being another Nuits Gouges. I went and surveyed what they had on the shelves at Jeroboam's in Hampstead and talked to the chap behind the counter there a bit. We came to the mutual decision that this was probably the best suited to my needs. It's a 2022 vintage. One thing I say about Jeroboam's, they do have a decent selection of interesting Burgundy, range of different producers, sometimes really fantastic bottles, but you know, like most bricks and mortar wine shops, they do tend to be skewed towards quite recent vintages, which is fair enough, you know, that's just what they can get hold of. But I find shopping online, I'm usually more able to find things that I think are more likely to be ready. But I think 2022 is actually a relatively forward vintage, and I've often said on this channel in recent videos, I've had some decent wines from that vintage. This producer is Henri Gouges. I think I have had something from this producer before. I don't recall if I featured that on the channel, probably did, probably bought it from Jeroboam's. Well, this artificial light is making that look quite red. I don't want to say pale, but you know, the opposite of black, on that red to black spectrum that Burgundy seems to exist in. It seems to be more over towards the red side, but that's quite possibly because I've got this bright white light shining through the bottom of it. I don't think I've given this a swirl yet, but I think that first nose, hint of something like glacé cherries maybe. Subtle and faint, not a strong cherry aroma, but I think we're talking cherries and possibly something slightly floral there. I think that probably needs a bit of waking up. The chap in the shop did say this would be better decanted, which is maybe a hint at the fact that this might take a while to wake up. So this first glass we may need to take with a pinch of salt. Yeah, again, cherries and slight floral character, sort of rose or rose hip. A bit like rose hip tea, herbal tea, that sort of thing. All a bit faint though, and again, this is giving the impression of a wine that's going to need a little while to wake up. There might be a bit of berry fruit there as well, a bit of strawberry, raspberry. All of my fruity thoughts are red. I don't know if that's just... I wonder if you gave me this blindfolded if I'd come to a different conclusion. As soon as I see the colour red in the wine, that does seem to taint my opinion, doesn't it? And similarly, when I see a wine that veers more to the black, yeah, almost a sort of bubblegummy version of cherry. Nice, more cherry-like notes on the palate. It's not as sweet. It's definitely not a jammy wine. I'm giving perhaps a false impression that this is coming across as jammy and sweet, but it definitely is not. But those fruit notes are appealingly slightly like sort of candied cherry. I think, again, on the palate, glacé cherry, something like that. But underneath that, there is something a bit more serious, maybe a bit more savoury. A little bit of a tannic edge around that, but relatively subtle, sort of slight hint of wood, but relatively subtle. I think I'm going to pause this for a bit. I've got an artificial light. I don't need to be hurrying this in terms of the sunset time and all that. I'm going to pause for a moment, swirl this a lot, possibly even come back to you on the second glass, I think, because I think this needs I think it does probably need a bit of airing. This is actually the third glass now. I've been mulling this over for a while. How has this developed? The main thing that I'm noticing more now is a sort of mushroomy character. I did go and look at the official tasting notes, or at least the Jeroboam's tasting notes, and they talked about some sous-bois, and I think I agree, but I'm experiencing it more as just mushroom here. I think we still have that combination that I've noticed in a couple of wines recently. Were they also 2022s of mushroom, an interestingly sweet sort of mushroom, or an interestingly sweet sort of cherry plus mushroom? And I think that's what we have here. And maybe that fruit is, perhaps it's veering more red berry rather than cherry. I don't know, it's a bit of both. It's red fruit, red berry, red cherry, and there's definitely some underlying mushroom there. This lighting is really awful. So yeah, it's nice. Cherry character, mushroom character, giving it that sort of Burgundian seriousness for people who like that kind of thing. Having just done a run of Gavinier, which is more sort of pure fresh fruit as the house style, do I want mushroom? I feel like I ought to want mushroom. That's the sort of thing that people who are more seriously into Burgundy seem to like, mushroomy character and soupoir and all that forest floor. If I were eating a nice bowl of cherries and someone threw in a mushroom, I like mushrooms, don't get me wrong, but you know, having a lovely bowl of ripe cherries, and would I really want to intersperse that with a mushroom? Maybe, I don't know. Stranger things have happened. I did once cook steak, fake steak, with peaches. Fruit and savoury things do sometimes go together, surprisingly. Duck à l'orange, I did that as well, fake version. I'm getting a bit more of that sort of tannic edge to it as well. It's not overwhelming. What I will say about this, in its favour, similar with some other 2022s that have been surprisingly ready, nothing about this is telling me that it's too young. The presence of mushroomy notes, that's something you would often expect in an older wine that only emerges in older wine sometimes. So finding that in a young wine gives almost an artificial impression of something that's been aged for a significant amount of time. So it's good on that front. I suppose it does have a certain amount of richness. I think I've probably already said seriousness a few times. So it is decent. I'm not unhappy with it. But I think given the choice between this and some of those Philippe Cavigny village level Nuits Saint-Georges, I think I prefer those, and I think they're, at least from Fingal Rock, a bit more competitively priced. This came in at £65, which to me is slightly on the steep side for village level Nuits Saint-Georges. I usually expect it to be a little bit cheaper than Gevrey Chambertin, for example. And this is certainly not a significantly aged vintage, which would also up the price a bit. So 65 to me compared to, I can't recall off the top of my head the price for the village level Gavinier Nuits Saint-Georges from Fingal Rock, but I think it's significantly lower than that. I'll put the price on the screen if I can remember. It depends what style of Burgundy you want. If you're really into that soupoir mushroomy thing, then this is going to work for you better probably than Gavinier, where that's usually less evident. I don't know that this was a very useful set of tasting notes in the end. I spent a very long time just saying initially glacé cherry and then later some mushroom. Could have done that in 30 seconds, couldn't I? Less. Anyway, I want to stop talking now because I'd rather just sit here and enjoy the gloom without this horrible light on. So, cheers.